If you walk the Royal Mile in Edinburgh today, you are walking through a city built on history. You see the castle, the statues of philosophers, the monuments to kings. But if you look closely, there is a ghost haunting this city, a ghost of a future that never happened. In the late 1690s, Scotland was not the romantic land of brave hearts and bagpipes we imagine today. It was a nation on the brink of extinction. Historians call this period the 7 Ill Years, and the name was literal. The climate had cooled, the crops had failed year after year, the cattle were freezing in the fields, people were dropping dead in the streets from starvation. It is estimated that up to 15% of the entire population died of hunger and cold. Scotland was a small, poor nation sharing an island with a global powerhouse, England. While England grew fat on the sugar, tobacco, and spice trades of the Americas and India, Scotland was locked out. The English Navigation Acts forbade Scots from trading with English colonies. They were trapped, isolated, desperate. The nation faced a choice: become a permanent vassal of England or find a way to become a global empire on their own. They chose the empire. In the coffee houses of London, a Scot named William Paterson was preaching a gospel of salvation. He didn't promise food aid, he didn't promise better farming, he promised the key to the universe. Paterson had a plan so bold, so geometrically perfect, that he claimed it would seize the world's trade and place it in Scottish hands. He pointed to a narrow strip of land in Central America on the map, Darien, the Isthmus of Panama. His plan would bankrupt the nation, kill thousands of its bravest citizens, and ultimately erase Scotland as an independent country. This is the story of the Darien Scheme.
To understand the disaster, you have to understand the salesman. William Paterson was a financial genius. This was the man who had conceptually founded the Bank of England. He saw the world not as a collection of kings and armies, but as a web of trade routes. In the 17th century, global trade had a geography problem. If you wanted to get goods from the Atlantic to the Pacific, from Europe to China, you had to sail thousands of dangerous miles around Cape Horn at the bottom of South America. It was slow, it was expensive, and it was deadly. Paterson looked at the map and saw a shortcut. His idea was simple: establish a Scottish colony on the Isthmus of Darien in Panama. Ships from the Pacific would dock on one side, goods would be carried over land and reloaded onto ships in the Atlantic. He called it the Door of the Seas. He predicted that this single colony would become the great trade hub of the world, eclipsing London, Amsterdam, and Cadiz. He claimed it would secure the trade of the two Indies. When he brought this plan to Edinburgh in 1695, he wasn't just pitching a business, he was pitching national survival. The Scottish Parliament passed an act establishing the Company of Scotland. But to build an empire, you need money. Specifically, Paterson calculated they needed £400,000. To put that number in perspective, £400,000 was roughly half of all the available capital in the entire Kingdom of Scotland. Initially, Paterson tried to raise funds in London and Hamburg. It was going well, but the English king, William III, interfered. King William was technically King of Scotland too, but his primary interest was England. He feared a Scottish colony in Panama would anger the Spanish Empire, so he pressured English investors to pull out. He effectively sabotaged his own northern kingdom. But this sabotage didn't kill the dream, it fueled it. A wave of patriotic fury swept through Scotland. If England didn't want them to do it, they would do it themselves. A mania took hold. It was the 17th century equivalent of the gold rush, and the dot-com bubble rolled into one. The subscription books opened in Edinburgh on February 26, 1696. The response was hysteria. Dukes mortgaged their castles, widows invested their life savings, servants pooled their wages. It is estimated that a quarter of Scotland's liquid assets were poured into this one venture. They weren't just buying shares, they were buying hope. They believed that in a few years they would all be rich. The Company of Scotland became a national obsession. They built ships, they stockpiled supplies, and they recruited 1,200 settlers, veteran soldiers, ministers, doctors, and the sons of the nobility. On July 14, 1698, 5 ships, the Caledonia, St. Andrew, Unicorn, Dolphin, and Endeavour, left the port of Leith. The entire city of Edinburgh emptied out to watch them go. There were tears, prayers, and cheers. As the ships disappeared over the horizon, Scotland held its breath. They had bet the house. Now they had to wait. The voyage took 4 long months. On November 2, 1698, the fleet dropped anchor in a natural harbor on the coast of Panama. They named it Caledonia Bay. At first glance, it looked like the paradise Patterson had promised. The harbor was deep, the water was clear, the beaches were golden. They immediately began building New Edinburgh and a defensive fortification, Fort St. Andrew. They planted a flag. They wrote letters home claiming the land was fertile and the natives were friendly. But the geography was a trap. William Patterson, the genius planner, had made a fatal error. He had never actually visited Darien. He bought the idea from old sailors' tales. If he had visited, he would have known that the soil was poor and acidic, making traditional European farming impossible. Worse, the site was surrounded by mangrove swamps, stagnant, rotting breeding grounds for the deadliest killer of the era: mosquitoes. The Scots didn't understand germ theory. They didn't know about malaria or yellow fever. They thought the bad air was making them sick. Within weeks, the settlers began to fall. The death rate skyrocketed. 10 men a day were dying. The healthy were too weak to dig graves, let alone build a city. The New Edinburgh they built wasn't a metropolis. It was a shantytown of leaking huts sitting in the mud. And then the reality of their business plan set in. The ships were packed with trade goods intended for the locals. But remember, Patterson hadn't done his market research. What did the Scots bring to the tropical jungle? They brought heavy wool coats, they brought thousands of linen periwigs, and they brought 1,500 English Bibles. They had brought winter gear to the equator. The local indigenous people, the Thule, were friendly but baffled. They had no use for wool in the sweltering jungle heat. They wanted weapons or tools, which the Scots were reluctant to trade. The great market Patterson envisioned was a fantasy. There was no one to trade with. As food supplies ran low and spoiled in the humidity, the settlers looked to the nearby English colonies in Jamaica and New York for help. They were willing to buy food, but King William's order had reached the Caribbean. The order was clear: no assistance to the Scots. The English governors refused to sell them food. The settlers were trapped in a green hell, starving, dying of fever, and blockaded by their own monarch. Even William Patterson, whose wife died in the colony, fell desperately ill and lost his mind to fever. By June 1699, just 8 months after arriving, the dream was dead. The survivors couldn't take it anymore. New Edinburgh was abandoned. The settlers boarded their rotting ships and fled. The voyage home was a floating nightmare. Because they were denied entry at English ports, they had to sail the long way. Starving and riddled with dysentery, they drifted aimlessly. On one ship, the Caledonia, over 100 men died on the return journey alone. Their bodies were thrown overboard daily, leaving a trail of corpses across the Atlantic. Of the 1,200 proud settlers who left Scotland, only 300 survived to see home again. But here is the true tragedy of Darien. In the 17th century, news traveled at the speed of the wind. While the survivors were dying in the middle of the ocean, Scotland was celebrating. Rumors had spread in Edinburgh that the colony was a massive success. People believed they had found gold mines. Based on these false rumors, the Company of Scotland launched a second expedition. In August 1699, weeks after the colony had already been abandoned, a new fleet led by the ship the Rising Sun set sail. Another 1,300 people, more supplies, more hope. History records that the two fleets, the dying survivors coming home and the hopeful new settlers going out, likely passed each other in the Atlantic Ocean. Neither knew the other was there. The second wave was sailing directly into a graveyard. When the Rising Sun arrived in Caledonia Bay, the silence must have been terrifying. They expected a bustling trading hub. They found ruins. The huts were burned. The graves were overgrown with vines. The realization shattered their morale instantly. They tried to rebuild, but the script repeated itself. The rains returned, the fevers returned, and dissent grew. The leaders argued constantly while the settlers died in the mud. But this time, nature wasn't the only enemy.
The Spanish Empire had been watching. They had tolerated the first group because they were dying on their own. But a second wave? That was an act of war. The Spanish viceroy in Mexico mobilized a massive fleet to crush the Scots once and for all. There was one brief moment of glory. A Scottish officer, Alexander Campbell of Fonab, led a daring preemptive strike through the jungle, surprising a Spanish detachment at the Battle of Tubacanti. The Scots won the skirmish. It was the only military victory of the entire scheme. But it was too little, too late. A massive Spanish fleet arrived and blockaded the harbor. Fort St. Andrew was besieged. The Scots were outnumbered, outgunned, and drinking brackish water. For a month, they held out under cannon fire, but disease was killing more men than Spanish shot. Finally, in March 1700, the Scots surrendered. The Spanish, respecting their bravery, allowed them to leave with their flags flying and drums beating. But fate had one last cruelty. The flagship, the Rising Sun, never made it home. It was caught in a hurricane off the coast of Charleston and smashed to pieces. Everyone on board perished. By the time the dust settled, nearly 2,000 Scots were dead.
The human cost was horrific, but the financial cost was the nail in the coffin. When the news finally reached Edinburgh, the economy collapsed. There was no money left. The savings of the nation had vanished into the Panamanian jungle. People were furious. They rioted in the streets. They smashed windows. They blamed the English king and the English merchants for sabotaging them. Anti-English sentiment was at an all-time high. But anger doesn't pay debts. Scotland was bankrupt, and the English government saw a golden opportunity. They had worried for years about Scotland choosing a different king or siding with France. Now they had leverage. England proposed a union, one kingdom, one parliament, one trade zone. In exchange, they offered a financial package known as the equivalent. The sum was exactly £398,085 and 10 shillings. Does that number sound familiar? It was a reimbursement down to the last penny for the losses of the Darien Scheme. It was a bailout. The wealthy investors would get their money back if they voted for the Union. Robert Burns, the famous poet, would later write of the politicians who signed the treaty, "We are bought and sold for English gold, such a parcel of rogues in a nation." On May 1st, 1707, the Acts of Union were passed. Scotland gave up its independence to save its economy. The United Kingdom was born, not out of brotherly love, but out of the wreckage of a failed colony in Panama. Today, if you visit Panama, the jungle has reclaimed everything, but ships pass through the Panama Canal every day, fulfilling William Patterson's dream. He was right about the geography. He was just 200 years too early. The Darien Scheme remains one of history's most brutal lessons. Ambition without preparation is just a very expensive way to die.
If you enjoyed this deep dive into the disaster that built Britain, make sure to like and subscribe, and let us know in the comments, was it bad luck or bad planning? Thanks for watching.